Hey there, everyone. Dan Hazen, Officer Wellness Coordinator here at Marysville PD. And we're going to start a bit of a series for ongoing training here. These trainings are available for credit on Power DMS. That's hopefully where you're viewing this. And this is for the first quarter, 2023. And we're titling this one Introduction to Resiliency. And there will be a currently undetermined number of parts coming after this, but this is just an introduction to the idea. You've probably heard the word resiliency kicked around in a lot of different settings, not just law enforcement, but mental health in general and in education and all kinds of places. It's kind of the hip word, but the reality is that the concept of resiliency has been around for a long time, and people in your line of work and combat veterans and strategists of all kinds, people who do really hard jobs, have known about resiliency. But I think one of the good things that it's happening because it's being discussed in all these different settings is it's really underscoring the value that's always been there. For people who've instinctively understood resiliency, now there's getting there are terms being placed to the things that veteran law enforcement officers have kind of always known, the people that have found a way through and managed to have a full life and a great career. So the material that I'm going to be presenting in this and future content on resiliency comes from the FBI National Academy Associates material that they teach, training that I took in order to give this training. So we're just going to break this down into a few chunks, as they say in the FBI training. We're going to gruntify it and get it down to a place where we can all actually get a good grip on it and figure out how to apply it to our lives. So introduction to resiliency. Let me share screen here. Kind of want to walk you through this overly complex chart, but just point out really the key components of it. So over here at the left where we begin, we see a session, which is the beginning of something. That's all it means. Why they chose that word, I honestly don't remember. But we can think about it this way. Pay attention to this right here, the event. And what you'll see is there's a life, there's existence, there are things that happen to the left side of the event, and there's all kinds of things that happen over here to the right side of the event. I like the terms they use here. We'll call this the boom. Could be a critical incident. It may be an incident that doesn't appear to be that critical. It may be an everyday kind of a traffic stop, a DV call, a conflict with a coworker or a supervisor, something like that. It may not be something that's catastrophic, critical, or particular stressor, but it's a boom. So there's life to the left side of the boom, and there's life to the right side. So we're going to talk a lot about right side stuff, what to do after there's been an event. But resiliency, what we're talking about now, resiliency training is all about over here. It's all about getting prepared for the boom, an adverse or traumatic event. But to kind of lay the groundwork for this, let's talk about the stuff that happens after the boom and how it relates to whether you prepared for it on the left side of the boom. So once you go through an event, you'll see two pathways. And most people know this red one here, which is the post-traumatic stress line, which if you follow along, you begin here and it's a stressful event. And again, it may not be something classically stressful, but that's kind of how trauma works. It can be an accumulated kind of a thing. But you'll notice it's heading downward like this. Now, you can intervene here at this point right away, and you can start to move back up in terms of your emotional, psychological well-being with some kind of an intervention. But if that doesn't happen, then we tend to slide farther down the scale toward PTSD. There can be an intervention maybe further along, self-limited or facilitated intervention. So, but again, this is maybe when the trouble has gotten pretty serious. But then we move into this much lower area where we're experiencing the symptoms of PTSD, which anxiety, anger, substance abuse, violence, sexual assault, isolation, all the really terrible stuff. This all happens down here. And treatment really may be our only option. Now, from anywhere along here, what we do is we end up adding stuff to what's called our barf bag. And it's shown here as a military pack, because those things are kind of designed to be heavy and burdensome and awkward. And that's really what it is it's a bunch of burdens and awkward, difficult things that we carry with us out of this experience. And BARF stands for blame, anger, resentment, and fear. So when an adverse event comes along and we move down this path a certain distance, maybe all the way to the bottom, and we don't deal with it when we don't have a resilient attitude that we trained for back here, then this stuff tends to get added to our barf bag. And you all know these kind of folks that are just literally carrying a load. They're burdened and angry. They blame everyone else. I had a recent interaction with a school teacher. Our chaplain's cadre was providing support to our school district. Had a rough time, and I was sitting in front of a school teacher, and it was amazing. Every single thing that I brought up in terms of, well, here's maybe something to think about. Nope, that won't work. Well, have you ever heard of this? Yeah, I heard about that. That didn't work. Oh, well, here's maybe something to consider. I've never heard of that, but here's why it can't. This was somebody who was so burdened, so cynical, so deeply wounded by past hurts and traumas that they hadn't recovered from, that they're just carrying this barf bag around. And it was amazing. It was everyone else's fault. It was their admin's fault. It was the student's fault. It was the parents' fault. It was her parents' fault who didn't take care of her. It was her ex. It was her own children. At no point in the 45 minutes I sat with this person did she take responsibility for anything, not even a little bit. Anger, she made me a little nervous. Like she was like super aggressively angry. Resentment, miles thick. You could just feel it coming off her. In fact, she said to me that she's been in this position for 6 years, but it's her last year. She's out. She's had it. She doesn't know where she's going to go, but she has quit because she's tired of everybody and all the garbage she has to deal with. Fear, I didn't experience so much from her, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. Fear is usually hidden pretty easily. So that's the barf bag. But notice here, this is the line that people don't often talk about, and that's the post-adversity growth. And notice the language changes. This is a traumatic stress. This is adversity. So right out of the chute, on the right side of the boom, we can redefine this perhaps as an adversity. Now, there's lots of stuff we don't have time. It's not the right place to cover the difference between these two things. But the point is that we can move out of this event and we can move towards growth if we have some resiliency. And the things that we can experience out of that are self-confidence, enhanced leadership, personal growth, spiritual growth, and appreciation of life. Yeah, same event back here. Let's say it was a traumatic event. Let's say it was an officer-involved shooting. Out of that, you bet. I mean, you've all seen it. Some of you have experienced it where you get dragged down this line. But the reality is, this is a possibility too. Appreciation of life, spiritual growth, personal strength, and all of that gets added to your grit. So instead of barf, it gets added to your grit, and that is guts, resiliency, initiative, and tenacity. The interesting thing, preparing for resiliency and engaging in resiliency training and valuing resiliency will actually create more resiliency on the other side of an event. It's a self-propagating kind of an affair, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the other thing you get are guts. It's like once you get on the other side of these events, I've experienced this kind of stuff, not certainly in law enforcement, I've never done the job, but on the other side of an adverse event, and I realized I got through it with a resilient attitude, I'm like, I could probably do that again. I might even be able to take 10% more. Resiliency is just that, being able to come back to some kind of normal from being stretched out. So let's pause here when we're comparing barf and grit, and let's define resiliency real quick. Resiliency, the best way I have to think about it is like a rubber band. And if you imagine, I should have brought a rubber band. If you have a rubber band and you just have it sitting in your hand, there it is in its normal state. There, it's relaxed. It's got a particular shape. It's not under stress. But then you take that rubber band and you stretch it out to about as far as you feel comfortable. You go any farther and it's going to break. That you can't recover from that. You could think about that as physical death. You could think about that as a psychological break of some kind. But you stretch that all the way out as far as you can. And then resiliency is when the stress is off, it comes back to its original shape. A rubber band is resilient. Now you can imagine other materials that you take and you stretch it out, and then you take the stress off and it stays. You could think of that as like a post-traumatic stress injury. That's a lack of resilience. So resilience is what we describe as coming back to a center, coming back to a normal, relaxed, healthy state. And resiliency just means that you can go through whatever the job doles out, and you can come back to a place of feeling good about yourself, about your job, about your life, and moving on in a healthy way. That's resiliency. So having an officer resiliency program, things like this, things like our rest stops, things like having mental health folks available to you, things like having a gym available, having office hours for your helpers to come and visit, doing social, all the things that we do around here surrounding wellness, all contribute to a resiliency program, to developing resiliency tools. Having a program like this, ultimately, the hope is to change the agency culture and mindset. So this is underway, and it has been for a couple of years now, to change the way we look at how you do the job and your wellness and your value as an individual in the job, and to build in resiliency and to make sure that your mental, physical, spiritual, emotional health is being taken care of. Well, that's a bit of a change. And that's happening all over the place in law enforcement, not just in Marysville. But it's changing it from a kind of suck it up mindset, which we'll talk about a little bit, to more of a, hey, let's figure out how to get on the other side of this thing and be better about it. How can we be healthier? Having resiliency programs increases performance. So all the stats tend to go up and to the right when you've got a functioning resiliency program. It creates positive interactions with the public. So because officers feel better about the job, because they know they have resources, because they have training, they're looking at their life and their work with more of a positive attitude, every interaction that you're going to have with the public is going to go better. So something that would go south in the first 1 minute, well, maybe it's going to go 5, and maybe you can find your way out. Or, maybe just the attitude the officer brings makes all the difference with that person that they're dealing with in the public. It helps develop better leaders. It increases morale when you've got a group of resilient people supporting each other, actually having each other's backs, and not just talking about it, and not just meaning physically if you're in a firefight, but like morally, like socially, really actually caring about each other, not trash talking, not gossiping, not undercutting, that kind of stuff, that increases morale. Resilient people don't do those sorts of things, or they do it a lot less. And it can actually save an officer's life. When you've got somebody who's got resiliency skills, they're going to be a lot sharper. They're going to be better decision makers, and they're going to be tactically more sharp in a situation. So it can actually save a life in a tactical situation. And also, like in terms of mental health, it can save an officer's life because they have something to hang on to in the event of a really, really bad day or week or year. And when without resiliency, they may slide all the way down to a place where life isn't making sense, and they may look for a way out. And resiliency can make the difference. So this is a new officer survival mindset. It's not just about officer safety. It's not just about good defensive tactics. It's about building resiliency into our lives so that the whole person can be well. So I want to talk about this idea of what resiliency can look like and how resiliency can be offered from one person to another. Resilience is a way to extend oneself to a teammate. We rise by lifting others, says Robert Ingersoll. When you're resilient, you're going to have additional resources to offer somebody else who may not have resources. Think about it like those of you who served in the military, or like me, like to backpack and get out in the boonies, or remember your academy experience when water is an issue. When I go backpacking, I don't carry a lot of water. I carry a water filter. So I've got access to kind of all the water I need, depending on where I go. Last summer, it was very, very hot, and I was out on a hike in a location where water sources were kind of hard to come by. So I budgeted things right. So by the time I was, maybe a half mile from arriving at my destination, it's been a long, very hot day, I had about, I don't know, half a liter of water left, and I'm a half a mile out, doing good. Well, I ran into somebody who had been on an equally hard route, but still had much farther to go. Guess what? I only had half a mile to go. I had a half a liter to go. Here's the water. And guess what? It made a big difference to that hiker out there. I was really worried that they were going to make it to the next water source, but I was able to help them because I had kind of practiced resiliency. I was able to lift them up. So in the face of stressors, changing demands, resilience is the ability to withstand. So manage my water in such a way that I can get through a tough hike, that I can recover from it. I got right to my next water source, and then I could grow. Guess what? It's like, you know what? Next time, I'm going to make sure that I've got even a little bit more extra water, because you never know who you're going to meet. So it's really fascinating to think about how a resilient individual interacts with maybe somebody who's struggling and not feeling very resilient. Here's a little movie clip from a Rocky movie that I think really, really underscores this.
You know, living with you, it hasn't been easy. People see me, but they think of you. Now with all this going on, this is going to be worse than ever.
It don't have to be.
No, sure it does.
Why? You got a lot going on, kid.
Well, my last name? That's the reason I got a decent job. That's the reason why people deal with me in the first place. Now I start to get a little ahead. I start to get a little something for myself. And this happens. Now I'm asking you as a favor not to go through with this, okay? This is only going to end up bad for you, and it's going to end up bad for me.
You think I'm hurting you?
Yeah, in a way you are.
It's the last thing I ever wanted to do.
I know that's not what you want to do, but that's just the way that it is. Don't you care what people think? Doesn't it bother you that people are making you out to be a joke, and that I'm going to be included in that? Do you think that's right? Do you?
You ain't gonna believe this, but you used to fit right here. I'd hold you up to say to your mother, this kid's gonna be the best kid in the world. This kid's gonna be somebody better than anybody ever knew. And you grew up good and wonderful. It was great just watching you every day. It was like a privilege. And the time come for you to be your own man and take on the world, and you did. But somewhere along the line, you changed. You stopped being you. You let people stick a finger in your face and tell you you're no good. And when things got hard, you started looking for something to blame, like a big shadow. Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, if you know what you're worth, then go out and get what you're worth. But you got to be willing to take the hits. and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that. I'm always going to love you no matter what. No matter what happens. You're my son, you're my blood. You're the best thing in my life. But until you start believing in yourself, you ain't gonna have a life. Don't forget to visit your mother.
It's pretty good clip, I think. So one of the best lines in that is he says, cowards do that, blaming others, and that ain't you. So this speaks to an idea of how resiliency gets translated to somebody else. And that's a very, very specific message Rocky gives his son. He doesn't call him a coward. What he does is he reminds him of who he really is. He's brave. Because his son, talk about a barf bag, right? I mean, you can hear this young man has already been burdened by blame, right? It's everybody else's fault. It's his old man's fault. It's everybody who's gonna, mistreat him because his last name's Balboa. He's angry. I mean, that's super clear, right? And he's angry at everybody. Resentment, it's coming across like mad, and fear, right? Could you hear that? It's like, this is what's going to happen. I know this is what's coming. He's anxious about the future. There's a barf bag. And what does the old man do? The old man kind of shares some of his resiliency with him. In fact, he just casts the vision of what resiliency is. It's not how hard you hit. It's how hard you get hit and then come back. So that's what winning is really about. That's what about being resiliency is. It's not about avoiding the boom. I mean, you're in the job where you get paid to deal with the boom. It's about how you come back from the boom. That's what resiliency really is. All right. Let's here. So why is resiliency important? We're going to have a couple of slides to cover this. First of all, resilience, it's not just about traumatic moments, right? I talked about at the beginning. Resiliency is required from just, everybody has to be resilient, even if you have a pretty cush, non-physically demanding job, stuff still comes after you. And again, it's kind of the daily stuff. It's about dealing with daily hassles and daily stressors. So daily hassles can seriously accumulate. Here's what people don't know about your job. You still have to go home and mow the lawn. You still get flat tires. Your kids still misbehave and you get a call from the teacher. Your spouses still meet you at the door with a list of things to do. You still have to pay taxes. You still get in fights with your spouse. You still get your feelings hurt. You still, I mean, you have all of these, the vacation didn't go like you planned. All this kind of workaday stuff on top of going out and dealing with the worst our society has to offer on a daily basis. That stuff accumulates. A great way to think about these stressors that you need to learn to be resilient with is like X-ray exposure. There's a lifetime limit of how much X-ray you're supposed to be able to absorb over the course of a lifetime, because it doesn't go away. You just accumulate. So if you were to go to the dentist, 2 times a year, get your checkup, and they X-rayed you every time, you'd be fine for a whole lifetime, because that's a really small dose. But if you went every day, that would start to accumulate. If you worked at a nuclear power plant, it would accumulate much faster. If you were on board a nuclear submarine or exposed to some kind of a nuclear accident, guess what? You're going to hit that lifetime limit. You guys, because of the work, your limit to stress is way reduced because you deal with such significant stress in the job. So these daily stressors take on a lot more significance. If you work in a nuclear power plant, you have to think about whether I want to go get my teeth x-rayed. because you're already up to your limit. So you need to be thinking about resiliency when it comes to just the regular stressors and daily hassles. That's an important thing to remember. So this resiliency training is not just about coming back from that line of duty death or that DV case or that child abuse case that was really significant. It's not about just those things. It's about the accumulation of those daily things. Resiliency is important because it helps us accomplish our goals, whatever we need to do individually or as a team or as an agency, despite all the challenges and stressors. It's not about being overcome by them. It's about moving through them and succeeding anyway. Resiliency skills tend to create positive outcomes, and that's in every situation, whether it's in some kind of a supervisory role where, let's say you're a sergeant and you've got an officer that you want to see them do well, but they're struggling. Being resilient helps you stick with it. It helps you figure out when you need to take it up a notch, and a notch or three, or however you need to do to stick with it and help that person come along. It's not just out there on the street. It's about advancing your own career. Being resilient means you're going to stick with it and figure out what you need to do to fill in all the boxes where there are blanks maybe that you need to take that next step. So it creates positive outcomes in everything that we do. It helps us to generate ideas. If you're not resilient, if you've got that barf bag, the last thing that you're going to do is try and be creative and figure out, all right, here's this big problem. I can't, like the Balboa kid, it's like, or that teacher I was telling you about. Doesn't matter what I'm going to bring. Nope, won't work. No, it won't work. You're not going to be coming up with ideas to overcome if you're not resilient. Better decision making. I mentioned that earlier. When you've got resiliency tools on board, you kind of automatically develop better skills to evaluate the situation that you're facing. And you're going to be able to say, well, that's stupid. That's the much better choice, because you're not already burdened down with, oh, nothing ever works. I've been here before, all that junk that can blur your vision. Resiliency means you can identify that better choice and grab at it. And it increases self-awareness. It's like when you're resilient, you tend to develop a memory for your responses to hardship in the past. Like, last time this happened, this is what I did. This worked last year, but 6 months ago it didn't. So I need, right? It creates space from all the stressors so that you can honestly evaluate your own performance, your own self-awareness, and you can make good choices. Where just carrying a barf bag, it doesn't do it. And here's the problem. The barf bag is kind of the result of just the old school mentality, which is, I don't want to hear about your resiliency. I don't want to hear about how you feel about this. Oh, your feelings, that's the other F word. Yeah, well, here's the problem with the old school method. It's not that it doesn't have its place. It's that it's totally incomplete. It's not wrong. It's just incomplete. The suck it up, get some dirt. Come on, sissy, keep moving. Well, keep moving is right. But how do we keep moving? Do we keep moving by as more stuff is added to your barf bag and you become unbelievably burdened and bitter, and you lose yourself, and you lose your joy for life, and you wind up with a post-traumatic stress injury that just more and more, you just suck it up. You just need to be tougher. And before you know it, you're not making it. Before you know it, you might make it to the end of a career, but who are you at the end of the career? How many marriages, how many broken relationships, how much addiction, how much debt, all kinds of things that we have to use to try to carry this burden. So suck it up. A great way to maybe think about the suck it up thing is it's good for the short term. In the middle of a workout, right? So you're benching, I don't know, a lot. And man, that really hurts. But you know what? Your buddy's going to say, come on, one more, suck it up. Get one more in. It's going to be those 1 or 2 more reps that real progress happens, right? So suck it up and push through it. That works. But if you've got 25 more reps, no. Suck it up isn't the right thing. Actually, suck it up is going to cause damage. You're going to hurt yourself. Then what happens? Well, you're not going to make the next workout, are you? No, you're going to be in the hospital, or you're going to be, in a sling or something like that. So for maybe 2 reps, yeah, suck it up. Come on, let's go. But for 25, not so much. So suck it up is not a resiliency tool that can be used over the course of a career. And really, it can't be used any longer than really a couple of days. It's like, you know what, we need to get through this incident. We need to get through this set, till I can get to my next day off. I'm going to suck it up for the next 48 hours. And then I'm going to get to that place where I'm going to really focus in on resiliency. Resiliency is super important for your physical health. This stuff is all it's in the books. It's just, there's no debate about it. Your blood pressure will be lowered when you have resiliency skills on board. You'll be able to encounter a high stress situation and your blood pressure will not spike during or after. It may go up, but it will come right back down. You will sleep better if you're resilient because you've learned how to put things off. It's like you're not carrying it. It's like you don't have that barf bag. It is really hard to sleep. Can you imagine a fully loaded pack getting into bed and trying to sleep with that? There's no way. Well, resiliency means you're not carrying that thing around. So you sleep better. It actually enhances your immune system. And so you'll be more resistant to colds and flu and everything else your immune system is there to fight off. It also assists with teamwork and leadership. People who are resilient work better together. And so you're going to be more valued by your team members if you've got a resilient attitude. How are we going to get through this? How can I help you? We're going to get through this together. Remember, it's about resiliency is about bringing somebody else along, and you're better able to achieve a consensus. So you may have differences of opinion on a team getting together. How are we going to handle this? Well, I think X, I think Y, I think Z. Resilient people have that bandwidth again. They're not burdened by that, the anger and the resentment and all those sorts of things that are gonna make it difficult to compromise. They're not carrying all that weight, so they're a lot more likely to go, all right, well, I'm not sure, but I'm willing to try it your way. I trust you. So it contributes to all those outcomes. It also contributes to neuroplasticity, which is this amazing reality that is your brain can actually change. Yes, you, even at your age and even with all the water under the bridge in your career, things can get better. Your brain can actually physically change. Did you know that? Your brain structure can change. There's a portion of your prefrontal cortex on the right side. I can't remember what it's called, but it's right here. And it's the place where we register and experience joy. And if you experience joy on a regular basis, that little part of your brain actually physically grows to accept more joy. Amazing. So your physical brain structure can actually change. Resiliency helps you focus on the brain-body connection. This is something that's hotspot in research these days, but it's the idea that how you think changes your body. And your body changes how you think. These things are intimately connected. So if you think resiliently, remember it affects your immune system. Well, it can affect all kinds of things, your diet, your sleep, these sorts of things. A good example of this is the London cab driver study, this resilient brain. In order to get a license to drive a cab in the city of London, you have to pass this amazingly difficult exam. They just call it the knowledge. You have to memorize every street and not address, but you have to be able to find every street in London. If you've ever looked at a map of London, it's amazingly complex. It's not a grid. It's, a couple thousand years old, and it's just a mess. These cabbies have to memorize it and pass this test called the knowledge. They've done studies with people before they've practiced for the knowledge and after their brains got bigger. Their brains actually got bigger. Now, contrast with that something that some researchers call cop brain, because they've studied cops who have been in a difficult, stressful situation for decades, and they haven't had resiliency tools. So they kind of get locked in. One of the things that comes along with it is an unrealistic pressure of perfection. And right, this goes with the job. You guys, your decisions are life and death. And so it's very important to make good decisions and to be prepared and to be thinking about safety. And there's no room for error. Well, that means that you tend to be resistant to change or innovation. It can get, your brains don't grow without a resilient mindset because you're always just one call away, right? One call away from a disaster. So resiliency is about changing a focus from that, let's just get everything lined up locked down and solid, and then we'll be okay, to tactical longevity, which means we've got to build in some of this more plastic thinking for our brains, for our bodies, and for our careers. So we'll just really quickly compare these kind of the cop brain or a fixed mindset with the growth mindset. So with this fixed mindset, we tend to think of intelligence and talent as static. Well, you were born a dummy, you're going to stay a dummy. Or, well, that person was born, they have a really good memory, and that's just how it is. My memory is terrible. None of those things are true. Intelligence and talent can actually be developed. And you guys know this. You have perishable skills, being able to shoot, emergency vehicle driving, those sorts of things. You have to keep those things up. You can actually get better at that stuff, and you can get smarter about things. It's not static. Fixed mindset tends to avoid challenges. It's like challenges are just going to simply create more opportunity for failure. Whereas a growth mindset embraces them, sees them, this is an opportunity to learn and to change. Fixed mindset sees effort as useless. You heard that from the Balboa kid. Yeah, this teacher I was telling you about, what's the point? Barf bag's so big, doesn't even matter. Why get up? Can't even carry it. Where a growth mindset sees effort as a path to success. It's always going to cost something. There's an investment. There has to be something spent, right? You got to spend money to make money. So let's spend some money and see what happens. Fixed mindset tends to ignore feedback. It's like, yeah, I don't really care about your opinion. I know what I'm going to do. This is how it's going to go. I'm in control and in charge, and I'm not interested in anything else. Don't care about it. Where a growth mindset learns from feedback. Now, that doesn't mean that you accept everything that comes down the pipe, because some of the feedback you get is garbage, but you can still learn from garbage feedback, right? It's like somebody just gives you the stupidest opinion. Well, I think you should have done that. Oh, thank you very much. Why did they think that way? What is it about their experience or their story that led them to such an asinine conclusion? There's something to be learned. Fixed mindset tends to disregard new information and approaches. Nope, this is the way we've always done it. That's the way we're going to do it. My favorite story of that is the little girl who was at Christmas dinner in the kitchen with mom, and mom was getting ready to put the ham in the oven, and she puts it in the pan, and then she takes a knife and she cuts about an inch right off the top of the ham. And the little girl says, "How come you cut the top of the ham off before you put it in the oven?" And the mother goes, I don't know. That's how grandma always did it. Hey, mom, how come we cut the top off the ham? And grandma goes, I don't know. That's how my mom did it. So they turned to great grandma. Hey, great grandma, how come you cut the top off the ham? And she said, well, it wouldn't fit in the old wood stove back in the old place. So I had to cut the top off to fit it in. So here we are doing the stupid thing because we've always done it, when there may be something new. So being open to new information and approaches is part of a growth mindset. So this then relates to when you adopt one of these mindsets or the other, it tends to move you along one of these spirals. This is called the broaden and build theory. And you'll see on the left here, there's the upward spiral. And this is what a growth mindset will do. It starts in this really interesting place called contentment, which just says, you know what? I just sometimes have to remind myself everything's okay. Not everything's perfect, but everything's fine. I'm okay with it. And from there, you can be hopeful. And hopefulness tends to lead to optimism. Being optimistic tends to lead to a positive expectation, a belief that things can get better. And when you believe that, then that can lead to enthusiasm, which is a kind of a rare thing these days. It's like, no, let's get after this. And enthusiasm finally leads to passion. And man, that is important in this line of work. If you're going to be resilient in law enforcement, you have to be passionate about it, right? Because there's a lot to overcome out there. But when you're passionate, that leads to a life of joy, knowledge, empowerment, freedom, love, and appreciation. And I can't think of really any way to top that. So that's kind of the upward spiral. A fixed mindset tends to create a downward spiral, which is ironic because it's fixed, but you're still going to move just downward. So interestingly, it starts with a kind of boredom. It's like, and boredom, not just like, oh, yawn, this is such a drag. It's more like boredom, this is the way it's always been. This is the way it's always going to be, and nothing is going to change it. Think of it that way. Well, that then pretty quickly leads to pessimism, which leads to frustration, irritation, and impatience. We all feel this, right? And after a while of living with that, then we start to feel overwhelmed. It's like there's nothing that we can do. It's just everything that comes our way tends to push us even farther down into disappointment, doubt, like, is anything ever going to work out? To worry, blame, which is a part of your barf bag, because at that point, when things are spiraling down this quickly, you got to find somebody to hang this on. That's eventually going to lead to discouragement, which draws us to anger, which can lead to even revenge, hatred and rage, jealousy, insecurity, guilt, unworthiness, and finally grief, depression, fear, powerlessness. And notice that at the bottom, being a victim, where you're powerless, where everything's being done to you. Did you hear that in that clip from Rocky? I so heard that from that teacher, and nobody wants to be there. Nobody wants, and you can do a lot about it when we embrace resiliency. So, yeah, I'm going to need you to summarize your summary for me. Yeah. So this is about resilience in life, not just in the job, but this job, in order to make it and have a good life, will require resiliency. Remember, we covered why resiliency matters, all the different things for your health, for team building, for increased performance, for you to be able to really have a good life. People can learn to be resilient. Yeah, some of you are thinking, whatever, I've been in this too long, it's too late for me. Bullshit. It is not too late for you. It's not too late for anybody. You can always learn resiliency practices, and they can always make a difference. We looked at the difference between fixed versus growth mindset. And, you can still embrace tradition, and you can still be an old guy who loves old school ways, but you can still have a growth mindset. That's possible. It's just about how you look at things. And then we kind of compared and contrasted the broad and build theories. All right, so that is an introduction to resiliency. We didn't really cover any resiliency practices. That's going to be for our next segment. So for now, I hope that you will think about this idea that resiliency should be in your toolkit as a professional in law enforcement, just like officer safety should be, just like team building or anything else that you see as critical. Any of the physical skills that you need, your understanding of civil versus criminal law, your skills as an investigator, all those resiliency needs to be in your toolkit right alongside all of those things in order to be able to do this job to the best of your ability and to enjoy your life. Because here's the bottom line. For me in my position as your wellness coordinator, I care about you and your life. I'm not particularly interested in my marching orders are not to try to get you to stay in the job. My marching orders are to help you as a person be well. And so resiliency is a skill that everyone needs. It's just absolutely critical for you in this role to be able to get back home at the end of every shift, to get out on a vacation with the family and really dig it, and to come back to the job. If this is where you stay for your whole career, to be able to really get every ounce of satisfaction and fulfillment out of this work. Because the longer I'm here, the more I'm impressed with what you all do, and the more I want to see you succeed. So that's our introduction to resiliency. We will catch you all next time.